The world is watching closely as a new storm brews on the horizon. Argentina, Pakistan, Lebanon. These countries have already collapsed under the weight of debt, inflation, and political chaos. But the question everyone is now asking is, which country is next? The signs of an economic meltdown rarely appear overnight. They build up slowly, like cracks in a dam, until one day the entire structure gives way. And right now, several nations are showing the same warning signals that preceded the collapse of Argentina's peso, Pakistan's currency freefall, and Lebanon's financial implosion. In today's deep dive, we're going to examine the next country facing the threat of total economic meltdown. We'll explore the hard numbers, the daily struggles of ordinary people, and the geopolitical pressures that push fragile economies over the edge. Every economic collapse begins with a story of imbalance. A government spending more than it earns, borrowing beyond its capacity, or printing money to cover shortfalls. When the currency loses trust, inflation skyrockets, and the people pay the price. Argentina offers a classic example. For decades, it has battled cycles of inflation, debt defaults, and IMF bailouts. Today, inflation in Argentina is among the highest in the world, and the peso has lost nearly all real value. Daily survival for ordinary Argentines depends on dollars, barter, and desperate workarounds. Lebanon's collapse was even more dramatic. Its banking sector imploded, people lost their life savings, and the currency lost 90% of its value almost overnight. Electricity, medicine, and fuel disappeared from the market. The streets of Beirut went dark, not because of war this time, but because of economic collapse. And in Pakistan, the story has been equally grim. Currency freefall, record inflation, IMF conditions that squeeze the population, and a political system too fragile to provide solutions. Today, the average Pakistani is crushed by soaring food prices, power shortages, and unemployment. But the million-dollar question remains. Who's next? One of the strongest contenders is Egypt. Once considered the backbone of the Arab world, Egypt now faces enormous debt, currency devaluation, and spiraling inflation. Its foreign reserves are shrinking while its debt repayments rise. More than half the population struggles to afford basic food, with bread and cooking oil prices skyrocketing. Egypt has been forced to rely heavily on Gulf allies and the IMF to stay afloat, but the pressure is mounting. If bailout funds dry up, Egypt could be staring down the barrel of a crisis that looks eerily similar to Lebanon's collapse. Another country under serious stress is Turkey. For years, President Erdogan pursued an unorthodox monetary policy, cutting interest rates while inflation soared. This has crushed the Turkish lira, destroyed household savings, and triggered foreign investors to flee. Turkey is still a larger economy than Argentina or Lebanon, which gives it more room to maneuver, but the signs of a slow-burning meltdown are visible. Rising food and housing prices, high youth unemployment, and increasing reliance on foreign currency swaps are ticking time bombs. Sri Lanka has already defaulted on its debt and faced massive street protests that toppled a government. While it has stabilized slightly with international help, it remains on the edge. Fuel shortages, food inflation, and political instability could push it back toward collapse if global conditions worsen. Nigeria is another nation we cannot ignore. Africa's largest economy is facing a severe currency crisis. The naira has lost enormous value, inflation is soaring, and subsidy cuts have sparked anger across the population. Corruption, weak governance, and over-reliance on oil revenues make Nigeria extremely vulnerable. If oil prices fall or political instability escalates, the economy could spiral into meltdown territory. But perhaps the most immediate red flag right now is Egypt. Unlike Turkey, which still has a diversified industrial base, and Nigeria, which can rely on oil exports, Egypt is heavily dependent on imports for food and fuel. With the global food crisis worsening after the war in Ukraine, Egypt's vulnerability has only increased. Bread prices are politically sensitive in Egypt. Remember, the Arab Spring itself was sparked by food and fuel inflation. If the government fails to secure stable imports, mass unrest could erupt again, this time under even harsher economic conditions. So what happens when a country enters meltdown? Daily life changes overnight. Savings evaporate. Supermarket shelves empty. People rush to buy dollars, gold, or anything tangible as the local currency becomes worthless. Hospitals run out of medicine, fuel stations run dry, and basic services collapse. The government loses legitimacy as it becomes unable to provide for its people, and protests erupt in the streets. At that point, the country faces a crossroads. Submit to harsh IMF conditions, find a powerful ally willing to bail it out, or descend into political chaos. The truth is, many developing nations are walking a tightrope today. Rising global interest rates have made it more expensive for poor countries to borrow. Food and energy shocks caused by wars and supply chain disruptions are hitting the weakest economies hardest. And when faith in the currency collapses, everything else unravels. Which country is truly the next Argentina, the next Pakistan, the next Lebanon? The warning signs point most strongly to Egypt, but Turkey, Nigeria, and others remain at risk. The sad reality is that in a global economy dominated by debt and dependency, any country without strong reserves and stable governance could face collapse almost overnight. For the people living in these nations, the crisis isn't about GDP charts or government bonds. It's about whether they can buy bread tomorrow, whether the lights stay on, and whether their children can dream of a future beyond survival. As history shows, economic collapse doesn't just break economies, it breaks societies. And when societies break, the world feels the shockwaves. This is News Nexus. Stay tuned, stay informed, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the unfolding crises shaping our world.